What are you seeing as like the biggest challenge for companies when it comes to deploying AI?
I think the big rocks will be, AI is coming out of the sandbox. So playtime is over and we need to get serious about the risks that we're taking on.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We believe at Transcend that the toughest questions deserve the clearest answers. Welcome to Dear Transcend, the show where we sit down with our own leaders to tackle the big challenges at the intersection of data, AI, and business growth. I'm your host, Cameron Ivey, and today we have Rowan Stewart, who leads our product for responsible AI and data classification at Transcend. Rowan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Cameron.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have fun. How's everything going for you?
Oh, man. I mean, the world of responsible AI is always like such a whirlwind that I'm constantly whipping my head around, finding out what is the latest and greatest. But I have fun with it. You've got to enjoy a bit of novelty if you're in this business.
Absolutely. I don't know why I just pictured like head on a swivel, just like an owl. You can just turn your head. Can you go all the way around? Like,
Let me. No, I'm stuck.
let's not go too
Can't
far.
quite get all the way around, but definitely feels like it's a bit of an up and down whiplash state always when it comes to responsible AI.
Obviously, AI is the talk of the town in every facet of business and just our entire world with social media. I mean, you hear it everywhere.
Yeah, you can't escape.
No, you can't. So I want to start with an interesting question. Is there a right way or a wrong way to deploy AI inside of a company?
I mean, I'm not here to judge, but I'm here to judge a little bit, I guess.
Let's judge a
So
little.
I think, like, number one, and everyone knows this, but it's really hard to actually act on, you need to actually have a problem that is appropriate for AI to solve, right? People will often come to us, or I've encountered a lot of folks in different industries who are like, let's push AI into this. Somehow AI will like magically make all of our problems disappear. And that's mistake number one is you really need to be thinking problem first and then see if AI happens to be an effective solution rather than just shoving AI everywhere. So I would say that's the wrong way. And the right way is to say, hey, I have a specific goal in mind, like enabling greater scale for my customer support or improving and automating my processes or improving my predictions for, manufacturing needs, etc. And then you see, AI can actually help me here. So that's like thing number one. And then I would say, since we are in the realm of privacy and responsible AI, it's really, really easy to build it the wrong way, right? It's really easy to do the wrong thing and abuse your customers' data and abuse their trust, because you're just experimenting. You want to see the value come out. And I think that leads a lot of companies to build these, fabulous AI systems and say to themselves, we're just sandboxing it, we're just testing it, and then turn around and realize, oh, wow, now we're in production, we're out of the sandbox. And we don't have all of these privacy pieces in place that we really need in order to launch this at scale.
So that naturally moves us over to the data part of things. Obviously, AI, at least in the US, is kind of like the Wild West in terms of it's how it's learning, it's how it's growing, it's using everybody's data. AI models need huge amounts of data. How do you ensure that data going into your models is actually clean and ready to use?
So, I mean, obviously we have a little bit of a home turf advantage because we have all of these tools at Transcend that we've developed for our customers, but also use ourselves that actually can scan our AI training data sets for anything like that could introduce bias into the data set, like demographic information like gender, age, etc., as well as just generally sensitive information. Like, for instance, if I'm training up a customer chatbot and I have an AI training data set of all of my historical customer chats, and some customers like, here's my SSN and here's my credit card number, having those actual SSNs and credit card numbers doesn't actually even help the performance of the model it just adds needlessly sensitive information into it. And so we like to actually make sure that we are pulling those pieces out that we know A, won't contribute anyway, or B, could introduce some sort of bias that we think is inappropriate. So I think data, you'll hear everybody in data science say this. Data is 80 to 90% of the question. And a lot of the modeling techniques, fine-tuning techniques are just like what you do after you've curated that data. But yeah, there's definitely a lot that you can do to keep your data clean. And then I think the one other thing that we don't talk about as much yet, but I think will become an increasingly important thing is the data consented by
Mm,
users. Right now, it's the Wild West, as you say, because a lot of these machine learning systems, AI systems that are out there, are not even asking users whether they're allowed to train on that data,
mm.
whether they're allowed to take it up into the black box of the model and use it to make the model better. I think users are expecting more now, and that companies will end up needing to respect not only the bias and the sensitivity of the data that's going into their training models, but also whether it's been consented specifically.
Yeah, that's a good point too. When you think about the companies that are really getting ahead with AI today, what are they doing differently with their data compared to others?
So I think a lot of companies end up basically sitting on huge mounds of data, but it's not easy to work with, right? It's hidden in
Right.
different silos. It's not structured in any particular way that makes it easy to ingest or get insights out of, etc. And the companies that do best with their AI initiatives are able to take broad pieces of their data, their company specific data, and make it useful for
Mm,
AI. So again, it's like that curation process. So I think like that's one of the key differences. And of course, there are some industries where that is proving a little bit easier than others. Like for instance, healthcare
um,
notoriously has like a lot of paper-based
right.
documentation still and huge numbers of data silos and a large amount of regulation on top of all of that. So it's very difficult in the healthcare space to actually drum up those huge data sets that you need in order to like really make a significant difference.
Yeah.
But I think also the other thing is that companies that are deploying AI well are also doing it smart, right? These big foundation models, the Claudes and the, chat GPTs and, fours and all of that good stuff, they are really, really good.
Mm,
Right, and they get better all the time, and so when you're deploying smart, you're doing things like agentic RAG and, like, using these curated pieces of data to augment on top of these, like, very broadly trained foundational models, and only if you're in a highly specialized field, which requires that big magnum opus of data, are you turning to something like fine-tuning, even with the lowered cost due to new fine-tuning techniques like QLoRa, et cetera. And I say new, but
yeah.
yeah.
I know you've done a lot of research and you continue to do research in your position. Is there one thing that stands out? What do you see happening going into 2026 and 27 in the future? What are you seeing as like the biggest challenge for companies when it comes to deploying AI?
Yeah, I think the big rocks will be, AI is coming out of the sandbox. So playtime is over and we need to get serious about the risks that we're taking on that maybe were put aside a little bit earlier because it was purely in the testing and validation phase. So I think that's going to be a big wave because before it was all everyone's doing a POC, it's free reign for all, but now that we're deploying these systems at scale, I think figuring out how to be responsible is going to actually matter because they're actually in operation um, in production environments and facing real customers, et cetera. So I think that's one thing. I think another thing is that we have been in this interesting kind of in between
Mhm.
space where we're thinking about agents in AI because, RAG itself is almost like a dirty word now in the industry, and you have to have agentic RAG or else you're not really up with the times. But we've had this interesting thing of how do we help humans by using AI, but I think there will be a lot more like machine to machine
Mm,
kind of communication that we need to think about. Like, how do we build out our AI systems to communicate with other AI systems very effectively? Because intermediating that with like the clunky UI interface that forces the AI to act like a human is actually wildly inefficient. So I
mm.
think we're going to see an interesting curve of we had AI that tried to use user interfaces made for people, and now we're going to have to rebuild our software and our systems a little bit to actually have a good AI experience instead of just a good user experience so that AIs
Ooh.
can do that work effectively. So I think, yeah, the rubber hitting the road on kind of responsibility and ethical development, and then the move away from, or rather the move towards kind of machine to machine communication would be the two big ones.
So let's say I'm a CISO, a DPO, or a legal person. How do I keep track of how our employees are using AI? How should I be thinking about shadow AI? And how do I keep it under control internally?
Well, first of all, CISO, DPO, legal person, you are not alone. We get this question all the time because the fact of the matter is, whether you have a formal AI program or not, your employees are using AI. They just are. They're
Right.
feeding it into their personal chat GPT accounts, or they're, Googling, using Gemini, etc. Like that cannot be stopped. And on top of that, as you say, vendors, the SaaS tools that you're using, your Salesforce, your Zendesk, anything at all, they're all coming out with AI features that then, your employees use to speed up their workday. And I think a lot of, companies are seeing great benefits from that. But in the position where you're trying to mitigate that risk, it can be very overwhelming, right? Because it's
Right.
kind of coming at you from all sides. So I think, yeah, first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, the biggest thing I think you can do to think about shadow AI is it's very much equivalent to shadow IT, which I think a lot of us are kind of more familiar with, of the idea that somehow you end up, you start out a company maybe with, a very clean set of systems and everything has its own role, et cetera. And then you look at your IT structure one day and you're like, oh my God, here are 100 systems that I had no idea that we were even using.
Right.
And it costs a lot of money and it creates a lot of risk, et cetera. So shadow AI is exactly that, but with specifically AI systems and AI features. And I think the first piece of it is just being able to scan and see what the heck people are using. And that's where tools like what Transcend does with system discovery really come in handy. So, what we do, for instance, is we help companies combat shadow AI by actually taking the core kind of SSO logins, like your Oktas, your Authos, etc.,
Mhm.
and the major logins for things like data storage, things like AWS, Azure, etc., and using those logins and scanning where those logins have been used to log into AI tools. And, we actually did this for ourselves and found like, oops, some contingent in the company is using like DeepSeek. And we did not procure DeepSeek. That is not something that was supposed to be officially on the docket.
Right.
But, it happens. It's very normal, but it's just not reasonable and not maintainable to actually ask every single employee. And honestly, I think I saw a study fairly recently that was like 30+% of employees will actively hide their usage of AI from their supervisors. So there's a bit of an incentive for some employees to actually say like, "Oh no, I'm just really fast now," you know.
Was that
Um,
the same study that showed a percentage of how many people actually put in really personal information into AI as well? I think it might have had something
it
about.
might have been, but that percentage is also like shockingly high.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to do their jobs, so they're responding to the incentives they've always had, but that means potentially exposing your sensitive company data to these kind of unverified systems. So that's kind of job number one,
Right.
is how can you find out what people are logging into, and especially when those systems are kind of high risk systems like AI providers. And then the other half of it is, I think, even if it's not a dedicated AI provider, all of these SaaS tools that we use and are familiar with, like I mentioned, the Salesforce or Zendesk or whatever,
Mhm.
and I'm not picking on those companies specifically, it's just, easy examples.
Right.
They're releasing AI tools all the time. And especially if you've already procured them, you know, they're not going through any of those processes to check whether they're posing a risk or whether you're comfortable with that. And so keeping track of whether you're using those features, how those features will impact what data you're sharing with those vendors, et cetera, is really key. And so we um, are just releasing in the next week something called vendor AI usage just for this, which is really focused on saying, hey, look, uh, here's a vendor and here's some of the top AI features that they're offering, so that you can stay aware and up to date with not only the ones systems that you're procuring, not only the dedicated AI systems like ChatGPT, which are more obvious, but sometimes the more kind of like insidious ones that sneak into the rest of your SaaS tooling and therefore kind of sneak into your organization, which just expands your attack surface as a CISO and obviously creates issues on the legal and privacy sides. So I would say those are the two big ones. Is it's about the dedicated AI systems, but it's also about the uh, the generic kind of SaaS tools that are adopting AI at a really fast clip and trying to keep your arms around that. And there's no way to do that other than automation. It's moving too fast.
Ah, great insights, shameless plugs, and thank you so much for digging into that. We appreciate that.
Great insights and shameless plugs are what we strive for here.